Paul Manafort met with Julian Assange around the time that he was coming on board to the Trump campaign. Wondering if you know if that meeting took place and if you remain confident in the White House's repeated denials that no campaign officials were involved in discussions about the plans to release John Podesta's emails.
Certainly remain confident in the White House's assertion that the president was involved in no wrongdoing, was not part of any collusion. The things that have to do with Mr. Manafort, I would refer you to his attorneys to address that.
Sarah, given what the president said this morning that Robert Mueller is ruining people's lives, is he considering a pardon for Paul Manafort or for others who were prosecuted, have been prosecuted?
I'm not aware of any conversations for anyone's pardon involving this process at all.
And if I can follow up, he also said this morning that Mueller is doing tremendous damage to the criminal justice system. If that's true, is he considering picking up the phone, calling his acting attorney general, and saying, fire Robert Mueller?
Look, I think that the president has had Robert Mueller doing his job for the last 2 years, and he could have taken action at any point, and he hasn't. So we'll let that speak to itself. He has no intent to do anything. See?
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. Over the weekend, we saw some powerful images of children as well as adults who were affected by tear gas fired by U.S. officers along the U.S.-Mexico border. We've heard the president talk about that at length yesterday, but one thing we did not hear from him was any expression really of regret that there were children caught up in this. I was wondering, does the White House regret the fact that children were affected by tear gas and that this situation took place, and is there an investigation underway to prevent this from happening again?
Certainly, the White House would never want children to be in harm's way in any capacity whatsoever. However, that is why we are continuing to encourage people to follow the law and go to ports of entry. Law enforcement officials have used appropriate non-lethal force to protect themselves and prevent an illegal rush across the border. And let's also not forget that this isn't the first time that non-lethal force like this has been used. In fact, tear gas was used on average once a month during the Obama administration for very similar circumstances. In fact, they were actually for far less circumstances because they didn't have the same numbers in the mass rush that we're seeing in this caravan take place. Certainly no one wants women or children or any individuals to have this happen, which is why we've encouraged them to actually follow the law and go to ports of entry.
John, I just follow up real quick on something that Ambassador Bolton mentioned when he ruled out a bilat between the president and MBS. Is the White House ruling out any interaction between the president and the Saudi crown prince, and is he the equivalent of diplomatic timeout?
I wouldn't say that we've ruled out any interaction. I know that the president's schedule is pretty packed and has a number of sessions that he'll be involved in with the G20 as well as a number of bilats. I don't think there's any time for us to add anything additional, whether or not there's some interaction. I'm not going to rule that out, and we'll keep you guys posted as that happens. Tomorrow.
Thanks, Sarah. Yesterday in Mississippi at his rally, the president said, he asked a question about Mike Espy. He said, how does he fit in with Mississippi? I mean, how does he fit in? I guess suggesting that he doesn't fit in. I mean, Mike Espy's great-grandparents were slaves in Mississippi. What did the president mean by that?
Due to the fact that that is an election that is taking place today, I'm not going to comment on anything that could affect anything taking place in Mississippi, and certainly happy to comment on that after today. John?
Thanks a lot.
The president's not guided by the Hatch Act. John, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Does the administration have a position on the government of Ecuador continuing to provide asylum to Julian Assange at its embassy in London?
I'm not aware of anything official. I'd have to get back to you.
And just one more on that, if I may, Sarah. Will you, from the podium, call on the Ecuadorian government to confirm whether or not some sort of meeting may have taken place between Paul Manafort and Julian Assange at its embassy?
Certainly, we encourage the process to continue to play out, but I'm not going to get engaged in specifics of that case.
President Trump has implied that a potential new deal with Mexico is a done deal, tweeting that migrants will stay in Mexico as they wait for their cases of asylum to be processed. How far along are talks with the new Mexican administration about the so-called Remain in Mexico policy?
Those conversations continue. we won't have a final decision until the new government actually takes over, which will happen on Saturday. And on Monday, we expect the new foreign minister from Mexico to meet and sit down with White House administration officials and the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, and continue and try to finalize those conversations.
Second question on Khashoggi, because tomorrow Secretaries Pompeo and Mattis will brief the full Senate on the murder. Why is a leader of a U.S. intelligence agency not joining them, specifically Gina Haspel, who many senators expect to hear from?
Ambassador Bolton addressed this. I'm not going to comment on behalf of the CIA director in that capacity. That's something I would direct you to them to answer.
Sarah, I want to ask you about the climate assessment that your administration released last week. The president yesterday, when asked about the economic forecast, he essentially said he didn't believe it. The takeaway for many people is that the president doesn't feel necessarily a responsibility to lead either in this country or in the world on climate change and preventing the calamity that your administration forecasts. Do you agree with that view? And if not, why not?
The president's certainly leading on what matters most in this process, and that's on having clean air, clean water. In fact, the United States continues to be a leader on that front. Even Obama's undersecretary for science didn't believe the radical conclusions of the report that was released. And you have to look at the fact that this report is based on the most extreme modeled scenario, which contradicts long-established trends. Modeling the climate is an extremely complicated science that is never exact. The biggest thing that we can do is focus on how to make sure we have the cleanest air, the cleanest water, and the president is certainly doing that and certainly leading on that front.
How is he doing that? I mean, the president's about to go to Buenos Aires and meet with all the leaders of the world's industrialized nations and developing nations as well. Isn't this a great opportunity for him to sit at the table and say, folks, this is what my administration just reported. This is the time that we all have to act in concert to prevent what my administration is forecasting?
Once again, we think that this is the most extreme version, and it's not based on facts. It's not data-driven. We'd like to see something that is more data-driven. It's based on modeling, which is extremely hard to do when you're talking about the climate. Again, our focus is on making sure we have the safest, cleanest air and water, and the president's going to do exactly that. April.
Sarah, I want to go back to GM. President Trump, early on in January 2017, met with the big three automakers, and he said he wanted to make the U.S. a more attractive place for companies to manufacture products, lowering taxes and business regulations. What does this move, this action by GM say?
Certainly, it's disappointing to see that GM decided to lay off these workers. The president's been extremely committed to bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States, which is why, since he took office, we've seen 400,000 new manufacturing jobs created in the United States. It's because of his policies that we've seen that grow. This is not about the president. It's about the fact that they're making a car, frankly, that people don't want to buy. And hopefully they will make adjustments and make changes and bring those workers back.
Sarah, getting back to Paul Manafort and the special counsel's office saying that he's violating the terms of this plea agreement by lying to investigators, would the president recommend that Mr. Manafort begin to cooperate, offer full cooperation to the special counsel's office?
We can only speak to what our role is in that process, and not only has the president, but the entire administration has been fully cooperative with the special counsel's office, providing hours and hours of sit-downs, as well as over 4 million pages in documents. We continue to be cooperative, but we also know that there was no collusion, and we're ready for this to wrap up.
And if I could ask a follow-up, the president doesn't believe the warnings in the climate report. The president doesn't believe the CIA when it comes to Jamal Khashoggi. The president doesn't believe the intelligence community when it comes to Russia meddling. Why doesn't he have faith in his advisors?
That's not true. The president has a great deal of faith in the intelligence community and certainly in the team that he has assembled around him. However, I've addressed the climate report. There's really nothing else to add on that front.
Khashoggi, you said that that was not true, that he doesn't believe the CIA. He said the other day, maybe MBS did, maybe he didn't, the Crown Prince.
And we haven't seen definitive evidence come from our intelligence community that ties him directly to that. What we have seen is a number of individuals that we know are tied to that, and those individuals have been sanctioned. The people that we have no doubt about their involvement, we've taken action on. And as he said, we'll see what happens beyond that, and if there's more definitive information, we'll make a decision at that point. Roberta?
Sarah, the Remain in Mexico meeting that you talked about on Monday, is that happening here or in Mexico? And is the United States offering Mexico any financial assistance to help accommodate the migrants seeking asylum who would be staying in Mexico as a result?
Sorry, on that second question, do you mind repeating that? It was the first part on whether or not the meeting is here or in Mexico. I'll get back to you on that. I'm not sure on the exact location.
Okay. Is the United States offering Mexico any financial assistance, or does the United States plan to accommodate the migrants who would be staying in Mexico?
I'm not aware of any financial assistance, but certainly we'll keep you posted if I get that.
Just to clean up on the bilats, you mentioned in your list a bilat with the Chancellor of Germany, but the ambassador did not. Has that bilat been canceled?
No, it hasn't. I think he was just given additional updates on the ones that I didn't mention. John?
So the president tweeted at length yesterday about the Mueller report, asking if it's going to show both sides. What are his concerns about any forthcoming Mueller report? And is that report is supposed to be delivered to no one else but the Attorney General? Is he concerned that it is going to become public without his knowledge?
I don't think the president has any concerns about the report because he knows that there was no wrongdoing by him and that there was no collusion. So I don't think he has concern on that front.
If he has no concerns, why is he tweeting so vociferously about it?
Certainly the president has voiced his unhappiness from the beginning that this has gone on, this ridiculous witch hunt for more than 2 years. Still nothing that ties anything to the president. We'd like to see it come to a conclusion. Peter.
Thank you, Sarah. Does the president believe that the work of the special prosecutor, Bob Mueller, is illegitimate?
I'm sorry?
Does the president believe that the prosecutions, the indictments of Bob Mueller are illegitimate?
I think the president believes that what I've said several times today and several times over the last couple of years, that there was no wrongdoing on his part, there was no collusion by his campaign, and beyond that, that's really all we can speak about here at the White House. Last question, Howard.
Thank you. 2 questions for you. The president, as you're speaking, is tweeting that he is going to be considering cutting all GM subsidies, including for electric cars. Can you explain why he says that he thinks that would help American workers? Can you explain why that wouldn't end up backfiring, as we've already seen, and who the president has consulted and what the timeline is for this decision?
I don't know that there's a specific timeline. As he said, he's looking into what those options might look like. The president wants to see American companies build cars here in America, not build them overseas, and he is hopeful that GM will continue to do that here. Second question
for you is on Afghanistan. The president on Thanksgiving Day told U.S. troops that we are winning the war in Afghanistan, which contradicted what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, that it was a stalemate. Does the president today still believe, after what we saw over the weekend, that we are winning in Afghanistan, and why?
Certainly, anytime you have a loss of life, particularly by an American service member, it is a horrific tragedy and something that no president wants to see, certainly not during their administration. And the president wants to make sure that the battle that we're fighting takes place there and not here. And he's going to continue consulting with his national security team and make decisions on how best to move forward beyond that. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Did you all violate the Posse Comitatus Act?
All right, folks, thank you very much for joining us and choosing